pieces. How is that to be working here in Rembrandt's house?
He's not in right now.
That's quite true. So being in this spot doesn't have any particular effect on you.
No, the building looks like new, so it doesn't look like he's still around. I mean, you can maybe you need some kind of medium to get him back. I don't know, get his ghost back.
Yeah, they expelled him for lack of money.
Yeah, so he didn't die here also, so I guess, his spirit is not around. I don't know.
So, I noticed when I was here yesterday that you do a lot of portraits. When you're doing a portrait, what is it that you're looking for in that, in a face, or is there a way that you come to the portrait itself?
Now, what you're looking for in a portrait is you're looking for yourself actually, and it's like a mirror. Every face is like a mirror. That's every interview is like a mirror of yourself, and that's the same with portraits. And that's also what is intriguing about it, because every time it's kind of mixture between you, the world, and the other person. So it's very interesting.
Now here you've been making a lot of portraits.
Yeah.
When you paint in your own studio and you're working there, do you work basically the same way, very fast, you develop it quite quickly, the personality of the person I watched yesterday?
Yeah, I like to do it as quick as possible. I don't know why, but I think to capture the moment, you have to do it quickly. And I think also it's very difficult to concentrate for more than 1 hour. So I'm like kind of a Zen painter. I want to do it at that time. You know, maybe you can study for 100 years to make then that one painting in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, so that's what I like to do.
Now, Rembrandt was very famous for his portraits, and oftentimes it was said that he was able to create emotion or to show the emotional state of that person when he was making either the portrait. Is that one of your concerns in portraits?
No, I don't think it comes or it doesn't come, because it costs a lot of trouble already to make a painting. And if you think about the psychology of the person, if you want to capture that, it's very difficult. I think it comes there by itself through your eyes, and then your arm, your brush, the paint, and then suddenly on the canvas there's the emotion and the psychology, without you even thinking about how you're gonna do it. You know, it comes there. You cannot say, now today I'm gonna make a portrait with very interesting psychology. It's paint, and that's what it always will be. But you can fantasize about who it is and what his thought. Is he a serial killer? Is he a pedophile? Or is he a very good holy man? Or, these things all come together in the painting, but you cannot say that in advance.
Now today you're working on nude drawing, and I think later you're going to paint this afternoon. This is part of what you do as a specialty, I think. Is there something? The female nude has been a classic throughout the ages. Is there a particular reason this is, other than male painters?
No, it can be very sexy, but it's also the human form changes every time. If you look at a plant, a flower or a tree, it don't move. Most trees don't walk around, And the human body, the human form, it walks around. In the morning you sleeping with a nice girl, she gets up, you know this moment can be so beautiful. She opens the windows, then you think God is there, you know. And you want to be a little bit like God, so you create Eve again. And yeah, that's what I see in every girl. I see the creation of human beings, and that's what you are. You're an instrument of God in that way, and that's nice.
Now today the model is assuming a lot of different poses, and I notice that you're working very fast. Is this part of your style also with your nudes? You work quickly and or what?
Yeah, I like to be them themselves, you know. Just this girl is a dancer, for instance, and I asked her to. We played some music, and she was just dancing with it. I think it's much more nice than you ask her to make poses, because if you ask them to do that, you get the classical poses, the poses which are so obvious. It's more interesting to make someone do the dishes, for instance. Then you get more interesting poses, and also part of Dutch tradition. If you look at Vermeer or Rembrandt, for instance, you see very simple things like a girl reading a letter or pouring milk or things like that, which are not so obvious to do, but are quite natural, and it has a kind of intimacy which is more interesting than the classical poses, which create more distance, I think.
Now, art and painting in particular have undergone a lot of changes in the 20th century. How do you see the role of painting and the painter here in the new 21st century?
Now, I think we as human beings don't change so much. If you look at the cave paintings, or you look at children paintings or paintings of Rembrandt, the differences are not so big. It will always exist, I think, painting, because it's a very direct way of create something. If you're in the middle of the desert in Africa, you can still make a painting, but it's much more difficult to make computer work, for instance. And I think that's also the big attraction of painting and drawing, that you can do it with such simple things. You don't need any money for it. You don't. If you have a finger and a piece of beach, you can make a drawing, you know, and that is the big attraction of it. And it's very direct link between your brain and your eyes, and the thing you do.
Now, speaking of Africa, I understand that you were in Africa painting not long ago. Different down there?
No, what I was looking for was the source of painting, because the spirituality of painting and drawing here and sculpture is, we don't really know why we do it. Sometimes we only do it to fill up a museum or a gallery, to sell these things. And Africa, art still has kind of a spiritual role in their beliefs in gods and spirits, a kind of religious thing. So it has a use to make a drawing or a sculpture. It has a direct meaning, and here the direct meaning is mostly to become famous artists or something like that. And I didn't want to. I'm not so interested in that. So that's why I went to Africa to look for the source. Why we're doing it. And it's, you can find it in New York maybe, but Africa has some direct meaning of how and why to make art.
Speaking of the how and why, what brought you to making art in the first place?
Yeah, I think like every child, you look at your big toe and you wonder why is it there. And you get a piece of paper. I think everybody is creative in some sort of way, and it stops after a while, because people they think they have to be like Rembrandt, for instance, And if they're not like Rembrandt, they cannot make art anymore. And that's also what you look if you see more primitive societies, which kindergarten is also a kind of primitive society. And then people don't have trouble with that because it's about the meaning behind it and not the result. It's the experience which counts very much. And in my vision, the experience can be more important sometimes than the result, because it's the experience in what we live by. That's the reason for us to live. If you sell second-hand car, it's also the experience of selling this car can be more nice than the result and making this money, which is also maybe interesting, but it's the experience which counts, I think, in life.
After Rembrandt House, what's next for you, Peter?
It's back to the Peter house, to the Peter Klaushorst house again, and I will continue what I've done here also, to make the portraits, the nudes, and continue with and look for new experiences. And because every time you make a painting, I'm always surprised at the results. It can be so bad sometimes, which can also be very nice.
Peter, thank you very much for being with us today.
Okay, thank you, and we're welcome to look at the works.
Thank you.
When we did this first work on the collection, cleaning it up and photographing it, the historians worked in the archives and got every story they needed. There's this amazing story about this detonator, which was bought by the Dutch government for 1 million guilders in 1848. It was the first time that the Parliament was resisting this decision and had a research done. That was in the Constitution, had been there for 1 year, this right. In the end, it appeared that this purchase helped the Dutch government out of the weapon race for 3 decades. So it was well spent money. Problem was that the one who offered it claimed to be Louis XVI's grandson, which he wasn't. So when we found this object, it looked like a wheel cap, something you screwed out of a car's wheel, but it appeared to be a thing worth 1 million guilders in those days. And it was there in the shoebox, laying around between all other sort of rubbish. So when it came out that this was this very famous and important thing, that was quite a shock. And these shocks, we encountered them all over this collection, because one thing fits to the other, and the one story took out the other one. So that's how it worked.
Well, tell me now, was there a reason that they built these incredibly beautiful and elaborate models way back in the 18th, 17th century?
Yes, there must have been several reasons. The first of all was because they were pretty. But we have some models which were used as a sort of a proposal shown to the Secretary of State. This is what we can do. Do you want it? So it was a sort of how do you call that? Reclame. Advertisement, yes. Another sort of function is that these models deal with rather complicated ideas. You can make drawings of these ideas, but no one could tell if the Secretary of State was able to read those drawings. So what they did was they hired very skilled model makers, and they made models of the proposals, the propositions. For instance, most of the things here, but there is a lovely model of a toilet used in ships. You could really splash the water through, and it works. Well, that's a very simple thing, but every object here, in fact, was an idea for making things better, work better. So that's how. That's another function of these models. There were also over there is a model that was given by a shipyard after the ship was built as a present, like it still is used today. Several shipyards give as a present a model of the ship to the ship owner, and that was done in the old days as well. But the decoration model is not very well represented here. Most of them are what we call scientific models. And there are very intricate and very clever things in them.
Now, one of the things on that intriguing poster that I see around Amsterdam is in fact what appears to be a submarine by common English vernacular of today. Could you tell us a little about that particular model?
Well, the model is proposed to be the oldest model of an original model of a submarine that was ever made. Of course, there are older submarines, but we don't have original models of them. And the story is that after Van Speyk gave his life in the Belgian War, there was a Dutchman living in Paris who said it wouldn't have been necessary. He could have survived if he would have had a submarine. And he had made a drawing of how the submarine could look like. And he gave this drawing to the man who was in the patents office. And he was also a very high-ranked politician. And this Mr. Lipkens looked at the drawing and said, no, this is rubbish, but coming to look at it, I have a better idea. So he transformed the idea of the submarine into his own idea, and he had someone who helped him, whose name was Olke Uhlenbeck, and he was a diver. He was, by the way, the first diver ever to die of caisson illness, the pressure problems. And this man was very good with his hand because he made this model. And everything is there. There are lorries to bring the ship in balance. There are is place for 4 people, 4 men who turned the centrifugal pumps. There was even a secret weapon on board, but on second thoughts, Mr. Lipkens thought it too cruel and took it out and took the secret with him into his grave. So the model is still here.
Now, you've presented a lot of models here that seem to have historical significance, and many of them were made at the behest of certain admirals even. I saw one that was absolutely beautiful over here. Were the admirals engaged in model making?
Not exactly in model making, but these were people who were not only fighting on ships. They were interested in everything concerned with sailing. We have had admirals in the 18th century who wrote enormous articles in magazines in which they demanded that the method of building of ships would be modernized and made better, and we should look at the English, and therefore we have some English models here, imported here by these admirals, showing this is how we could do it. Why don't we do that? We are no longer ahead like in the 17th century. We are a second grade country. This is we can take this. So they were interested in much more than just sailing ships, and that's how a lot of these things are taken into the Admiralties collection and later in the Navy collection. The Admiralties, Holland used to have 5 Admiralties. So we have 5 different fleets, and they were more or less each other's competitors. So instead of fighting with the enemy, they fought each other, not really as heavily as they did with the enemy, but there were always differences between them. And at the end of the 18th century, when the French came here, it was all over. The Admiralties were put together, and there was one navy, and that's when this collection started.
Now, some of the models that we see here are not full models, but only a half or a quarter or a cut interior. Yeah. What was the purpose of this?
Exactly the same as the other models. There are models only for decorative purposes. There are models as reclame again. What was the word? Advertisement. Advertisement again. There were models that were used as when you have a drawing made. It is not always so that this drawing is correct in every way. So you could check the drawing by making a half model to see if the lines were all good and fitting. That is another purpose. There's even one model which was used to make a ship's drawing, because it was built up from different blocks, put together, shaped, taken apart, and the lines were drawn around them. So that was one method of designing ships, very primitive of course, but it was a method.
I once read something about the Tsar of Russia, or the future Tsar. He came first to Holland to study shipbuilding and decided it was somewhat unsatisfactory and went to England. What was the deal with that? Do you know anything about that?
Well, it has often been used, this story, to show how badly we did build ships in those days. It's completely wrong. People forget that the Tsar came to Holland in the first place. So there was nothing wrong with the ships. But what this Tsar was after was he wanted to have a system which he could introduce into his own country. Now, the Dutch built in a traditional way, and they had nothing on paper. When a shipbuilder had the length of his ship, he knew what the beam would have to be, how deep the hold would have to be, because that is all in ratio, all in formulas. Now, what you can only learn this traditional way of building by taking part of it. And I must say, I admire this Tsar very much, because he did take part of it. And he stayed here for half a year, and he tried to manage to take over this system of formulas. He didn't succeed, because it was logical. Every shipbuilder here had a training of maybe 20 to 25 years before he was able to build ships of his own. So even the Tsar couldn't learn that in half a year, and he found out in time. So he went to England, and in England they were already building from ship's drawings. So the only thing he had to do is to import drawings of every charter ship. There were lists added to it with the sizes of all wood parts. So there was more or less a prescription how to make a ship. That was what he was after. But those ships were not much better than the Dutch ships.
Well, it's a beautiful collection. I wish you a lot of success with it, and thank you for being with us today.
Okay, very welcome.
Hi, this is David Heine of Aspect Art. Today we're standing in Rembrandt's Curiosity Closet in the Rembrandt House, newly renovated and scheduled to open to the public in just a few days. Rembrandt was an inveterate collector. In fact, some say it was what got him into trouble and eventually forced him to leave this house in bankruptcy. Today we're going to talk with Titia Velinke, who is the curator of this show about Rembrandt's Curiosity Closet. Now you can just imagine Amsterdam in the 17th century with the VOC ships coming in just a few blocks away from here, bringing things that had never been seen in the New World, from the New World to Europe. In fact, Amsterdam was kind of the headquarters for that, for these curiosity objects and ethnographic items like stones and butterflies and iguanas, shark teeth and turtles. Well, Rembrandt bought them all, as well as paintings by Rubens, graphics by Dürer, you name it, he collected it. So today we're going to be talking about this very special collection of Rembrandt, and I hope you enjoy it. Titia, you're the curator of the new show here at the Rembrandt House, and it's a kind of a strange anomaly of different things that Rembrandt collected. Could you tell me a little about how you went about getting all these things?
Well, it was quite a journey, I must say. I first tried to figure out what kind of objects were mentioned and what kind was meant by the different objects. And then I started reading about it, talking with people from the art dealers, but also curators in other museums. Everybody has his own specialty, so you really learn a lot, I must tell you. What's very nice is that Rembrandt's collection is so broad. He collected shells and corals, butterflies, etc., for which I went to the Zoological Museum in Amsterdam and Naturalis in Leiden. And a lot of other things like ethnographic objects, for which the Tropenmuseum in Amsterdam and also Volkenkundig Museum Leiden, Nusantara Delft were very helpful. For coins, I first thought about a penning cabinet in Leiden, but unfortunately that was a little difficult because they really have a lovely collection, but all on view. So I ended up in Leeuwarden, in the Fries Museum. They also have a very nice collection, which is a little less known. Also for the Chinese porcelain, I went to Leeuwarden, to the Prinsessenhof. Some things we have here on a permanent loan is 2 beds from the Rijksmuseum from the first half of the 17th century. And, well, a lot of sculpture, for example, which was very hard to get. The really antique ones come from the Rijksmuseum van Oudheden in Leiden. And the other ones, those are plasters made from real antique busts in the Louvre and in the British Museum. And there are some other casts coming from the Central Museum in Utrecht and Amsterdam Historisch Museum here in this town. So it's not everything I went to, but the biggest problem probably was to get 17th century albums, and that was a very important part of the art chamber of Rembrandt. because he owned some 3,900 drawings and some 4,000 etchings, which he collected in about 70 albums. And to find 70 17th century albums, that's almost impossible. We partly succeeded. You don't find them all 70. And you don't find them all 17th century. But they really give a very good impression of what he had. Most of the objects are from the time of Rembrandt, from the first half of the 17th century. There are some objects like the naturalia, fossils, etc. Those, of course, are much older. But shells and corals, we just don't know. It could be from the 20th century, but it doesn't make any difference because they haven't changed in 300 years. So, and probably also when you would have had still 17th century old shells, they were mostly stored in oak cabinets. And oak has a very terrible, I don't know how to say that in English. Yes, it is acid. So it just does something with the shells you don't want to see. And I think this is the best solution, to just take the things out from the museums.
Well, now let's say what this really is. This is a curiosity closet that was very popular in the 17th century, and Rembrandt had a very special kind of curiosity closet, didn't he? You've told me where you got these things. Maybe you could describe what Rembrandt was doing with all this stuff.
I think he had three main reasons for his stuff. First of all, of course, it was his capital. He dealt with it. He sold prints he first bought from auctions. But he also used a lot of his prints and drawings, especially that part of his collection, as a source of inspiration, to just make a new composition out of it, or use certain elements in his own drawings or prints, which you can also see in